Now, with the magic of Zoom, we are bringing you from London the directors of the film, Neil Boyle and Kirk Hendry.
Hello.
Hello.
Did you guys like the movie? Yes. So, Kirk and Neil, can you tell us a little bit on how did you decide to? It was a long process to make this movie, about 10 years, I think. And why did you choose Michael Morpurgo's book, and why it took so long to make it?
Well, it actually started about 20 years ago for the lead producer, or the original producer, Sarah Radcliffe, who optioned the book just after the book came out. So for her, it's been a 20-year journey from the initial option to seeing the film projected for the first time. So it was always her dream to turn this book into a film. And then she eventually got in touch with Neil and I, because she decided to do it in animation eventually. Because I think originally she'd been thinking about live action, but when she made the decision to go animation, she got in touch with Neil and I. And it took 10 years to, was it 8 years to raise the money?
Yeah,
European co-production, and then 2.5 years of production. So for us, it's been a decade, but for Sarah, it's been twice that long. So it's quite a thing, but here it is. But we also, I mean, in terms of what I think part of your question was,
yeah, why the book? Why this book?
Well, I think for Neil and I mean, there were obvious thematic elements that that appealed to us greatly, but also just in a purely as filmmakers, we could see that this was a great opportunity for cinematic storytelling, because the screenplay, which was actually the first thing we read before we read the book, because the book has a lot of internal character dialogue, which you can't obviously present on screen in a film. So Frank Cottrell Boyce, the screenwriter, had gotten rid of most of the dialogue. And we saw that immediately as an opportunity for sort of silent filmmaking with, blocking, editing, music, and using those techniques to tell the story, which Neil and I really like. And also, of course, Michael Morpurgo is famous for, his all of his stories are really about reconciliation in some degree, between people, and KENSUKE'S case, or even a lot of his stories cases about animals, our reconciliation with the natural world, which of course is comes through very strongly in the film. But that's all there in most of Michael Morpurgo's stories. He's very big on that.
And it's really unusual as directors that you get a story that is an action adventure film which works for all ages, for kids right through to adults and old people. So you have that action adventure thing, but it actually has a message that's kind of worthwhile. We think talking about the whole environmental thing and this whole thing about people connecting across cultures. So to have something that's kind of got something that's a great message, but is also a fun film and has action adventure was pretty rare. We've read a lot of scripts, and this was a really good script, and one that really attracted us.
And I like to this is mostly hand painted animation, so it's the old traditional school of animation, not computer, but it's with the pen, the pencil, and the ink. Can you explain to the audience why it was important for you to use this process rather than something that would have made the movie faster and simpler to a certain extent?
Well, in fact, I mean, the first most important thing style-wise is that Kirk and I both like hand-drawn animation, because we think it's essentially, the word we use is charming. It's captivating, and it has a kind of magic quality to it, like an illustration coming to life, which I think a lot of people respond to, and particularly now when we're sort of saturated with CG. And the other thing is that, contrary to popular belief, doing things in sort of 3D and CG is not cheap. It's not cheaper than hand drawing it. I mean, we didn't have a very big budget, and it also meant that we could afford to make the film. We never could have made this film in CG, even if we'd wanted to, which we didn't. So there were kind of two reasons why we ended up with the style we had.
And you raise the hand if you have any question. Okay. Oh, there is one here. Yeah.
When is it set?
When is it set? Yes. When is the film set?
Well, the book. When do you think it was set?
70s. Said 70s.
Yeah, I think the book's set sometime in the 80s. But we decided just to get rid of any clue to when it's set. I mean, if it was set more contemporarily, there'd be more technology on the boat, but we just wanted to have it more like a fairy tale that you can't quite tell when it's set. And that, I guess, the thing that reigns the time in would be if Kensky was in World War II, how old would he be, when he's late at the end of his life? So that probably would be the late 80s. But again, he has that sort of wizard quality about him where he almost seems ageless. It doesn't really matter if he's 100. It's like, it just works in that sort of fable way. So we didn't really want to set it in any particular time.
And there was an interesting thing, and in one of the earlier drafts of the script that Kirk and I were working with Frank Cottrell-Boyce, our screenwriter, on, we kind of knew it probably would be about mid-80s, but as Kirk said, we didn't want to draw attention to it. And the conceit we had at the time for showing the journey that Michael takes with his family and condensing it was that he actually shot a little video on the boat. And we were researching what video cameras look like in the mid-80s, and they're these giant things, And we thought, the more we thought about it, the more we thought, God, this is really going to date the film. You could kind of disconnect, particularly younger people now thinking, what the hell is this big thing on his shoulder? For children now that, we're just are used to video phones, phones on their camera and so on, cameras on their phone. So we thought, what can we do? So essentially, like Kirk's saying, we just got rid of all that technology and thought, okay, let's just have a logbook. And Michael draws pencil and paper, and let's remove anything from the imagery that really tells you specifically when it is. And that was our solution. And definitely, I think it hopefully will make it a little bit more timeless and that the film can last a little bit longer.
And is it true that the logbook is the drawings are your children?
Yes, they're my slave labor children. We talked a lot about it. I mean, you can tell Kirk and I get on obviously because we co-directed this and we have share a very similar taste. And one of the things we have this particular thing about is when very good adult artists and animators fake children's drawings, and they try and draw in a more naive way than they do, and it just sticks out to us. So we said we have to get a child or some children to draw these drawings, and I said, well, I have 3 and they're free. They work for chocolate. So over several weekends, I kind of wheeled my kids in, and they did hundreds and hundreds of drawings. And that's, even though it goes past in seconds, they did a fantastic job anyway. And it was nice. It was like a little family moment in the film.
I think there was a question here.
No, you like.
Go ahead. Oh, don't be shy. Okay.
Okay, Isabel wants to know how the film was different than the book.
Did you get that? How the film was different than the book?
It's quite a lot different, really. I mean, it's pretty easy to say what's similar, which is the themes, the characters, the basic plot. But really, we sort of along with Frank, screenwriter, we sort of built it back up from the ground up to work out how to tell essentially that core story in the most compelling way for film. And there was also an epilogue, the book. I'm not sure if anyone's read it in the audience, but where Michael, once he returned to England, he eventually tracked, when he got older, he tracked down Kensky's son. He found out that his son was still alive in Nagasaki, and he went to track him down, which is a lot of people really like in the book, but we decided not to include that in the film because, when you read a book and you've got an older character in it, you're not necessarily visualizing a new character in your head. It's all sort of the spirit of the person stays with you as they are. Whereas when in a film, you have to show an older person. So to bring in an extra face or an actor at the end of the film, right at the last moment, would have changed it too much. So we thought that the ending of the film really is when Kensky and Michael say goodbye, which is why we even did the family reuniting in a super wide shot. So you never really even have a moment with the family. You just tick the box that they've been reunited, but the last image in your head really is the closeness of Kensky and Michael and their moment saying farewell. That's where, for us, the story really ends. So.
But we work consistently with Michael Morpurgo in the sense of showing, as we adapted with Frank, the story. Michael Morpurgo is very behind us and enthusiastic the whole time. And I think the key for him was, I don't know how many people in the audience sort of have seen this or aware of it, but when he did the book War Horse, before the Spielberg movie, it was a stage play, and they did it with puppets. I don't know, probably lots of you have seen it, but puppets on stage. And it was quite a big stylistic departure. It wasn't trying to be realistic. It was almost like a puppet show with actors. And that was so successful. And I think in Michael Morpurgo's head, he realized, gosh, you got to give other artists the freedom to sort of adapt it to their medium, but keep the spirit of the book going. And that's what he did with us. As long as we kept very much to the spirit of the book, he was very happy for us to adapt the details and so forth. And we kept showing him what we were doing, and he gave us his blessing, or he would give us a note if he felt we were straying too far. So luckily, at the end of the film, when Michael first saw it, he was in tears and tears of joy, I'm happy to say. And he subsequently said, not only is this film his favorite filmic adaptation of any of his books, but he actually said in France towards the audience, he says, I actually think the film is better than my book, which was an astonishing thing for him to say. I'm very generous. So we were very honored and very happy.
We have a question here.
What's your favorite jungle animal?
What's your favorite jungle animal?
Gosh, in this film or in any
yes,
at all?
He's nodding. Yes.
Film, I have a strange kind of affection for the little bugs on the leaf that sadly get crushed at one point. I think it's rather sweet that these little tiny insects get their own little moment of glory and their own close-up in this film. So I actually like them, and of course Stella the dog.
I have to agree. The stink bug on the leaf and her larvae are my favorite animals in the jungle, just because I think the desire was for us was, can we get the audience to care about a bunch? It's easy to care about orangutans and the mammals, but can you get the audience to care about the small, either reptiles or insects? And I always feel that happens. So I like stink bug as well. The flying animal, the flying fox type animal, the Colugo, with the membrane wings. We did a lot of research on lots of animals, but that one came out particularly well, I think, and I love that creature.
That said, we don't think there's going to be any kind of merchandising potential in little stink bugs, though.
Speaking of research, the film is so visually beautiful, and I was wondering if you used paintings as a reference, if you used real animals. I mean, how did you created these images, and what was the parameter, the model, in a sense? I mean, the light, the water, everything is so. It has a balance between naturalism and stylization that is very magic.
Thank you. Well, in terms of research for creatures and flora and fauna, we were looking. Borneo was our go-to place, but in terms of how we rendered those, Neil and I have really liked the sort of golden age of Hollywood matte paintings, which before they started using photographic matte paintings as they do in contemporary modern films, because they didn't really have the tools. Well, sometimes they would take photographs and cut them out in old matte paintings, but they generally would get people to paint them. So really super detailed painters that when you pulled the camera back wide enough, it actually almost looked photoreal, but because it was painted, it had that slight artifice about it, and that's exactly what we like. Is it real? Is it not quite real? You can tell it's been handmade, but it's not one or the other. So that's our main inspiration, or one of the main inspirations for how the backgrounds looked, was the sort of 50s and 60s Hollywood and British matte paintings. And our art director, Mike Shorten, came up, because we had so many backgrounds to make in such a short amount of time. He sort of came up with a technique that assisted that look quickly, which was to start with photographs and then do a process on them that started to make them look a bit more graphic, and then get illustrators and painters to come over and do a sort of paint pass on them. And some of the lighting was actually used in 3D. There'd be like a 3D model incorporated as well for shadows and highlights. So that got the lighting done quite quickly. So it's a kind of a strange technique, really, but
sort of stylistically, the other thing we were fond of doing, and we've done this throughout the film, and maybe you notice it sometimes and maybe not because it's subconscious, really, but that was to start with quite real photoreal reference, but then we would always, as directors, approach and say, okay, what's the emotion in this scene? What's the psychology of the characters in this scene? And we always tried to make sure that the color and the lighting and stuff like that would reflect kind of like how the character's state of mind was, you know, in the sense, like people say, when they're in love, everything feels like it's in technicolor and brighter, and it's that kind of feeling. So when Michael wakes up on the island, not knowing if he's dead or he's gone to heaven or he doesn't know where he is, you cannot see where he is. It literally is foggy, and as he begins to see and hear things, then things come out of the mist. And that's a deliberate kind of psychological use of using the backgrounds and styling them to reflect his own confusion in his head, for example.
Is there any other question? How important was for? There is a hand? No. Okay. But how important it was for you? I mean, the film, it doesn't hit you on the head, but clearly is a film that encourages deep love towards nature, you know, respect and love towards nature, a strong sense of family. Doesn't matter how unconventional the family is. How important were these themes for you when you decided to make the film? I mean, how yes.
Totally. I mean, I think it informed, the sort of subtext of it informed us. Well, it became the text. It informed us all the way through, and there were lots of little clues. You know, there are the obvious things to do with Michael and KENSUKE'S relationship and him sort of in effect having two fathers. But as Kirk says, we tried to apply that to all the animals on the island, so that you're aware that all animals have their families, be it the flying colugo, you know, licking her little baby, or the stink bug with the little larvae and so on. So it was a theme we kept planting throughout the film. And I don't know how, maybe, I don't know who maybe noticed this in the film, but when you have the flashback to Nagasaki and the young KENSUKE is going off to war, his son comes up to hug him and he slightly pushes him away because he doesn't want that. He's not able to express that close, you know, physical emotion, and marches off to war. But then, of course, by the end of the film, he finally can resolve that with his kind of new son. When Michael, he bows to him once again, of course, Michael goes, no, I'm going to come and give you a hug. And then he finally can feel that hug. Mm-hmm. So we sort of planted these little ideas all the way through the film.
I think we've had enough time, and we need to let on for the next show. So I want to thank you so much. Soon they will announce the release plan for the US. We can't say anything right now, but very soon, so you can tell all your friends about this movie. And please thank Neil and Kirk.
Oh, thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, everybody, and thank you for selecting the film.